Okay. So this is the vlog for March 16th. This is the actual vlog for March 16th. And I have not a confession, but an admission to make. I recorded yesterday's vlog in the evening like I usually do, but apparently I didn't actually hit the publish button when I was finished and getting everything set up for um, YouTube. So the title says March 15th, but the upload date is actually this morning because when I got to Starbucks and opened up my Surface Book, I was still on the web page and the publish button hadn't actually been pushed yet. Oops. Now, in the spirit of this project, I have not actually lapsed. I did make the recording last night, and this is today's version, or today's entry. But I goofed. I think I also have one of the videos uploaded, but not part of this actual playlist, which I'm not actually sure it can go all the way to 365. So I might have to do like vlog spring, vlog summer. I don't know. I'm noticing the camera's having a little bit of trouble color correcting for the room right now because somebody came in today and opened this window, which I'm sure seemed like a good idea at the time because it was so nice today. It was really nice today. But it is sort of, it's creeping me out. Like, I know that I'm on the second floor in this building, in this house, and that there's really no chance that anything's going to pop up back there. But since I can actually see it in the camera, I think I'm just going to do this. Good as new. I'll open that up when I leave so that whoever brought it down will be like, why are you closing my windows? So, with all that covered, what am I going to talk about today? Well, I spent the last 3 days talking about Transformers, specifically the in-world fictional history of Transformers. So I thought maybe today I would do something slightly different, but still Transformers themed. I want to talk more about the real world history of Transformers and cover this briefly. I'm going to try and do it in 4 minutes. Don't time me. So Transformers got started as, let's start before this. Transformers got started because back right around the time Ronald Reagan became president, there was a deregulation of or a repealing of a law that had formerly made it impossible to use a television show as basically a form of advertisement for children's toys because it was thought that targeting children in this manner was unethical and therefore should be unlawful. Well, toy manufacturers have lots of money and lots of lawyers, so eventually that regulation was repealed. Hasbro decides to take advantage of this after seeing Mattel do a fantastic job with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which was the first television show basically made to sell toys. And Hasbro did it in a big way with G.I. Joe and Transformers. G.I. Joe was it originally was a Hasbro toy line, but they were dolls basically. They were like big 12-inch figures with uniforms that you could take off and switch between the figures, characters, whatever you wanted to call them. They were dolls. A lot of time I get made fun of for playing with dolls, and I just say, yeah, it's a doll. And that usually people go, that didn't take. So, where am I going with this? So Transformers. Hasbro didn't make Transformers themselves originally. They bought the rights to sell a bunch of figures from Japan called Diaclone and Microman, which is spelled like Microman, but is pronounced in Japanese as Microman. they released both of these toys lines together and called them Transformers. Since both toy lines were separate, they had the same gimmick. They were things that turned into robot characters. Diaclone was vehicles. Micromen was like human-sized objects, like for the big examples being a tape recorder and all of its cassettes, and even a gun, a human-sized pistol, P-38, Walther P-38. And that became the bad guy leader named Megatron. The good guy leader, Optimus Prime, was created from a toy called Convoy in Japanese. And he remained Convoy even when it became a Japanese cartoon show called Fight Super Robotic Life Forms Transformers. When it first got started in America, I was 3. It was 1984. I was 3 years old. My sister had just been born. My dad got me this big red truck and trailer called Optimus Prime. Now, 3 years old is a bit young, but he had seen me be very interested in Legos and knew that I had a pretty good sense of how that stuff worked even at that age. And he was an airplane pilot, so he would come home from trips with gifts sometimes, and a lot of times they were Transformers or Lego sets or whatever. They had a dramatic impact on me. Because my dad was a pilot and because he spent so much time away from home. You know, a lot of kids imagine their dads not being there when they get home for dinner. My dad wouldn't be home when I got home, and he wouldn't be home for dinner. He wouldn't be home when I went to sleep. He wouldn't be there when I woke up in the morning. And it's not because he didn't love me. He loved me a lot. And he worked very hard to provide for my family, for my mother and my sister. And these little gifts were a little way of showing he cared. And for better or worse, they sort of made me a very materialistic person. When I was a kid, I always wanted toys. I always wanted a new toy. And, I'm sort of embarrassed by it, but I think part of this vlog has got to be me talking about things that are embarrassing, just because if I don't say them here, then they'll never get said. Transformers continued to release toys each year. The first 2 years, the focus was almost entirely on realistic items, real cars that were actually licensed vehicles. Lamborghini, Porsche, Nissan, at the time was actually Datsun, had a whole bunch of cars that were faithful Datsun replicas. Like I said, the gun that Megatron turned into was an actual Walther P-38 with a barrel extension and a, what do you call this brace? Bar something. Anyways, it was designed to look like the gun from The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was an old TV show. Very powerful looking handgun, made for an interesting leader, although one has to question the value of a leader turning into a gun that has to be wielded by a subordinate, especially when that subordinate is a character like Starscream, who is synonymous with backstabbing and betrayal. The first 2 years were realistic videos. By the third year, they started touching on futuristic stuff, because that was 1987 was when Transformers the movie came out, and the whole thing takes place in the far-flung future of 2005. So from that point on, the vast majority of characters didn't look like they had ever been on Earth, even though most of the action still took place on Earth. And after the third season, after the movie and the third season, for whatever reason, Hasbro just decided they didn't want to keep supporting the cartoon. It might have been for reasons involving stupid episodes like the one I mentioned a few episodes back, or a few vlogs back, about Casey Kasem leaving because of a show in a fictional country called Carbamia. But as this was all happening, the thing that actually killed Transformers, and you might laugh, but it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. By and large, people agree that what happened was, in 1987, Transformers aired its last full season of a cartoon in America, at least in Generation 1. And at that particular point, that's when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon had just gotten started. And these figures were coming out, and Transformer figures could transform, but they didn't have a lot of posability, and they had some accessories, but usually only one or two weapons. And in the case of some figures like combiners, they would come with a foot or a hand so that they could turn into an arm or a leg. Meanwhile, these Ninja Turtle figures are coming out, and I remember vividly they had amazing posability. They had trouble standing up, but most of the kids were just used to holding them and bashing them into each other. They were very durable. They could survive hits like that, while Transformers were sort of famous for their fragility. They came with tons of accessories, which is funny because in the show, the Turtles themselves were famous for using one or two weapons apiece. And if they used two weapons, it was two identical copies of the same weapon. So Leonardo had two swords. Raphael had two sai, which are little handheld trident-shaped weapons. Michelangelo had nunchucks. Sometimes he had one pair, and sometimes he had two pairs. And Donatello had a bow staff, which is just a staff, but they call those bow in Japanese. And those four happening dudes, those four heroes in a half shell, in their popularity, put my childhood focus out of business. And that's particularly poignant because this week, Toys R Us has gone out of business. They're liquidating their entire chain of stores. The company will be dismantled and its assets sold off probably within the next year or two. And I could talk a lot about what this means. It means a lot of people are without jobs. It's a sign that a lot of collectors, especially people like me, who are adults and don't want to go to stores and go slumming through aisles where the kids are looking for their new toys, when I can just easily order something online and usually get it for cheaper, honestly. It's a change in the market, and it's a change in the wind, and that's sort of what happened to Toys R Us. It's still sad. They did a lot of exclusives, and it was just a fun place to be. You know, you never want to grow up. But here I am, 37 years old in my middle age, making videos on the internet that people aren't probably actually going to watch. Anyway, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.